Christmas dinner wasn't supposed to feel like a funeral. And yet, the moment I stepped into my parents' house, something in the air was already dead. No one greeted me. The house was warm, but the silence was colder than the wind slicing through my coat. I stood there for a beat too long, holding a bottle of wine I'd bought out of obligation, before finally setting it down on the kitchen counter. No one looked up. I'm Leah, 34, old enough to stop expecting things from people who've shown me, time and again, that their love has terms and conditions. But I came anyway, like every year, because tradition has teeth, and guilt is a leash you wear even after you've chewed through the collar. My brother Colin was already seated at the table, laughing about something with Mom. Probably another joke at someone else's expense. He had that effortless confidence of a man who'd never paid a bill in his life, but still assumed the world owed him comfort. He glanced up, gave me a nod that barely qualified as acknowledgement, then turned back to his plate. Leah, Mom said, not bothering to stand. You're late. I wasn't. I was 5 minutes early. I said nothing and took my seat. The roast was dry. The potatoes were gummy. The conversation was forced. I listened as they talked about Colin's kids. How well Emma was doing in gymnastics. How Josh got Student of the Month. I didn't ask about them. They didn't ask about me. I wasn't part of the loop. I was an afterthought with a name tag. Then, Dad cleared his throat. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the hum of meaningless talk. He set down his fork and folded his hands like he was about to deliver a eulogy. I felt my spine go stiff. Leah, he said too formally, we need to discuss something. I looked up. Mom was suddenly very interested in her glass. Colin leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing on his lips like he'd been waiting for this moment. We've updated the will, Dad said, and we've decided not to include you. The words landed like snow on stone, soft, cold, heavy. I didn't say anything, not at first. The silence dragged. Colin sipped his wine. I heard the faint click of the heating system turning on. Everything was still. Finally, I said, You're removing me? Dad nodded too quickly. It's not personal. It's just practical. Practical, I repeated. You don't have children, Mom added, eyes still down. Colin does. He has more responsibilities. You're independent. That last word was a knife. Disguised as a compliment, dipped in acid. I nodded. So this is what you've all been planning. No, Mom said too fast. It's not like that. But it was. And the worst part? I wasn't surprised, just disappointed in myself for thinking for even a second that maybe this year would be different. I looked at Colin. He didn't flinch, didn't blink, just leaned back and said, It makes sense, Leah. You don't need it. And that was the moment I smiled. Because I saw it clearly for the first time. This wasn't about fairness. It wasn't even about money. It was about erasure. They wanted me out of the picture. And now they were tying it up with a bow on Christmas. I stood up. Not fast, not loud. I picked up my napkin and folded it neatly next to my plate. All right, I said. Mom looked up. Leah, don't be dramatic. I laughed. Quiet, short, sharp. This isn't drama. It's acknowledgement. You made your decision. I accept it. Colin tilted his head. Come on, don't make this a thing. Oh, I'm not, I said. You already did. And I left. Walked out into the cold, not because I was upset, but because I finally understood. I wasn't part of this family. I was their utility, their fallback plan, their fixer. And now, that they thought they didn't need me, they were cutting the cord. What they didn't realize is, I held the other end. They didn't know that the mortgage was in my name, that the insurance, the utilities, even the internet were all under my accounts. I had taken over during the years they were struggling, and no one ever changed it back. Because I was reliable. Because I would never walk away. Except I just had. When I got home, I didn't cry. I opened my laptop, logged into the accounts I'd been managing for years. I hovered over the cancel autopay button, then clicked it, one by one, gas, electric, water, internet. Done. Then I sat back. Not angry, not triumphant, just done. But here's the part they never saw coming. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to yell. All I had to do was stop. Stop solving, stop saving, stop subsidizing their delusions. They'd already removed me from the will. I was just making the rest match. 2 days later, Colin called. Hey, did you forget to pay the electric? The whole house is out, I replied with a single word. No, then hung up. An hour later, a message from Dad. Leah, house has no heat, fix it. No greeting, no question, just a demand. I turned off my phone. But here's where it gets interesting. That night, I got a text from someone unexpected, Ava.Collins' wife. We never talked. She always kept a strange distance from me, but now she sent a message that simply read, I'm sorry. I didn't know they were planning this. I stared at the screen. Then she sent a second message. I told them it was wrong. They didn't listen. And suddenly, a puzzle piece clicked. I remembered the Thanksgiving dinner 2 years ago, how Ava pulled me aside and asked quietly if I was okay, how she offered to help with the dishes, even though she usually avoided the kitchen. Back then, I thought it was just politeness. Now, I wondered if she knew more than she let on. I typed back, Thanks. You don't owe me anything, but I appreciate it. She replied, I might owe you more than you think. I didn't know what she meant. Not yet, but something told me that Ava wasn't just an observer in this family mess. She might have been a mirror, reflecting back everything I refused to see. By midnight, the house had gone dark, literally. A snowstorm rolled in, temperatures dropped, and the messages kept coming. Mom, Leah, it's freezing. The power's out. We have your name on the bills, right? Please check. Dad, this isn't funny. People are cold. Colin, fix this. Now. I didn't reply. I made tea. I sat in the warmth of my apartment. And for the first time in years, I felt calm. They thought they could erase me without consequence. But I'd learned something dangerous. When you stop playing a role they wrote for you, the whole story collapses, and I was finally the one holding the pen. They didn't call the next day. That was the first sign. Normally, if I missed a call or didn't reply fast enough, Mom would text something passive-aggressive like, hope everything's okay, or let me know you're still alive. But this time, silence. It wasn't peace. It was plotting. I woke up the morning after Christmas to snowfall and a strange calm. The kind of silence that creeps into your lungs and settles there. I made coffee, stared out the window, and waited for the crash. Because people like them never just let things go. They regroup. They reframe. They re-attack. I didn't have to wait long. By noon, I got the first alert. My name had been removed from the shared cloud drive that held family documents, holiday photos, and even scanned versions of my late grandfather's letters. A shared space I created years ago. Gone. No message. Just erased. I logged into the utilities account, all still in my name. They hadn't noticed. Not yet. 3 years ago, when Dad's credit hit the floor and Colin's bank account had more overdraft than balance, I'd offered to, temporarily, take over the household bills, power, gas, water, internet, the whole infrastructure of their daily lives. I never took it back. They never asked me to. Until now. That afternoon, I opened the electric provider's dashboard, clicked Suspend Service, and paused. A pop-up asked, "Are you sure?" I clicked yes. 10 minutes later, I cut off the gas. Then the water. I waited to feel guilty. I didn't. I felt clear. At 7:23 p.m., Colin called. I didn't answer. He called again. Then Dad. Then Mom. Finally, I opened a voicemail from Colin. His voice was tight. "Hey, house went dark. Did something happen with the bill? Let us know." Let us know. Like they weren't the reason this was happening. I texted back one word. Resolved. The calls stopped for the night, but the next morning they started again, this time sharper. Dad. "This isn't funny, Leah. Fix it." Mom. "There's no heat, Leah. It's below freezing. The kids are cold." That last part wasn't true. The kids weren't there. Colin's wife had taken them to her parents' place 2 days earlier. I knew that because Ava had texted me again. "They told everyone you chose to cut ties," she wrote. But they didn't say how. I stared at the message. Then the second one came. "I hope they didn't lie to you too." That was when I realized I hadn't been removed from the will this week. It happened months ago. Christmas was just the announcement. The real betrayal had already been written, signed, notarized. I just didn't know it, but someone else did. Ava had warned them, and when they ignored her, she'd started collecting quiet receipts. I didn't trust her yet, not fully, but I started to suspect she wasn't just some silent observer. She might be the only one in that house who ever saw me clearly. That night, I sat in my apartment, warm, safe, quiet, and I wrote a list. Not a revenge list, not a punishment list, a transfer of power list, every bill I'd covered, every time I'd bailed them out, every holiday I'd hosted, every check I'd sent just this once, every repair, every debt consolidation, every favor labeled as, "You're the responsible one." I stopped counting at $137,000. Colin once said, "You always keep track of everything." He meant it as an insult. He was right. Day 3 without heat, and the tone of their messages changed. "Mom, we didn't mean it like that." Colin, "You're taking this too far." Dad, "You'll regret this." It was like watching a bad script on repeat. First denial, then deflection, then desperation. At noon, they came to my door. I didn't let them in. They stood outside, shivering. Mom's cheeks were blotchy. Dad looked furious. Colin had that fake calm he wore when trying to sell a lie. "You've made your point," Dad said through the door. I opened it just enough for them to see my face. "Have I?" Mom reached forward. "Leah, please, this isn't like you." I laughed. "You've never known me well enough to say what's like me," Colin snapped. "We're still your family." "And I was still your daughter," I said. "When you cut me out of the will," they flinched, finally. A crack. "We thought you didn't care about that stuff," Mom whispered. "You always said you didn't need anything." "That's right," I said. "I said I didn't need anything. And you believed me. Because it made it easier to take everything." They said nothing. I leaned against the frame. "You'll want to find a temporary place. It's going to snow again tonight. And as you've already guessed, I'm not paying another cent." Dad exhaled, his hands in fists. "You're punishing us." "No," I said. "I'm letting you experience independence. You said I didn't need the family's help, so I assumed you didn't either." Colin muttered something under his breath, but I caught it. "Crazy bitch." I smiled. "Careful, Colin. That mouth of yours runs on power I provide." They left. Not because they wanted to, because they had no play left. That night, I called a locksmith and changed my door code. Then I added 2-step verification to every account I had. I deleted them from shared cloud storage, revoked their access to the Netflix account. I even pulled the spare key from under the planter, just in case. The next day, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring, then listened to the voicemail. "This is Rachel from Camden Family Law. We're following up on your inquiry about revoking financial cosign responsibilities. We'll need a few documents signed before we proceed." I hadn't called them. Someone had used my name. I froze. Then Ava texted, "You might want to check your credit. I think they're scrambling." And that was when it all snapped into place. They hadn't just erased me emotionally. They were trying to erase me legally, financially. Everything they accused me of, being cold, calculated, detached, they were doing behind my back. Quiet, paper trails, emergency switches, backup plans I wasn't supposed to see, but I had already stopped playing defense. I picked up the phone. "Rachel? This is Leah. I didn't request anything from your office." "Who did?" There was a pause. Then, "A Mr. Colin Everett called on your behalf, claiming to have power of attorney for you." I closed my eyes, then opened them. "He doesn't. And I suggest you check your authorization process because this is about to become a legal issue." I hung up and smiled, because now they hadn't just lost heat or water. They'd stepped into something bigger, and this time I had more than control. I had evidence. The third day brought silence again, but this time it was loaded, like air before a storm. No calls, no messages, just stillness. I recognized it immediately. The calm wasn't peace. It was strategy. They were regrouping. I'd grown up watching them do it. When guilt stopped working, when pressure failed, they retreated. But not to surrender, to reframe, to rewrite the narrative and relaunch it with new packaging. By noon, the first message finally arrived. From Mom. "We're still family. We've all said things we regret. Can we just talk?" That word, talk, was their weapon of choice. It was never a conversation. It was a performance, carefully rehearsed, designed to steer, not to understand. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked to the corner store, bought myself fresh flowers. Not because I needed them, but because I wanted to start replacing the muscle memory of self-sacrifice with new, better rituals. I placed the flowers by my window, watched the snow fall behind them. My heater hummed. I made hot chocolate. The contrast was jarring. I was warm. They were freezing, and for once, I wasn't trying to fix it, but I knew they weren't done. That night, I checked the cameras I'd secretly helped install at their place years ago, part of a home security upgrade they begged me to finance after. A fake break-in that turned out to be a squirrel. I never removed my admin access. They never asked. Through the living room cam, I saw them, huddled in jackets. The firewood Colin bragged about splitting himself last fall? Barely. Enough for 2 hours. Mom sat under layers, flipping through the photo album I gave her last Christmas. I remembered how she barely thanked me for it, muttered something about finally printing out those digital pictures. Now, she held it like it meant something. Dad was pacing, arguing with Colin in the kitchen. No audio. But body language. Speaks. Finger pointing. Accusations. Colin shoved a chair. Mom flinched, and still, I felt nothing close to pity, because this was the reality they wrote. I just made them read it aloud. The next day, a new message came, but not from them. Renee, Leah, honey, your parents didn't mean to hurt you. It's been a rough few weeks. You know how your father gets. I stared at the screen. The next part nearly made me laugh. They've always loved you in their way. You're stronger than they are, and sometimes people punish what they envy. There it was, wrapped in sugar but still poison. They envy you, so they hurt you. Just accept it. Be flattered. I replied with one line. I'm not flattered by abuse. She never wrote back. That night, I got a voice message from Colin. His voice was cold. Clipped. You've made your point. The kids are freezing. If anything happens, it's on you. He was using them now. As a shield. As currency. The problem? They weren't even in the house. Ava had messaged me earlier that day. I took the kids to my mom's. Colin doesn't know I told you. I listened to his message again. If anything happens to the kids? I almost smiled. They were trying to paint me as the monster, the cruel, bitter daughter who abandoned her family. But the cracks were already showing, and the deeper truth was starting to bleed through. I forwarded the message to Ava. She replied 2 minutes later. I think it's time we talk. We met at a small cafe on the edge of town. Neutral ground. She looked tired. Not like someone surviving a power outage, but like someone surviving a decade-long lie. I don't know what they told you, she began, but I know what I've seen. I let her talk. Turns out, Colin had been planning to take over the house outright for months. Had spoken to a lawyer about getting Mom and Dad to sign a transfer of title document. They were hesitant, until the idea of cutting me out sweetened the deal. Fewer heirs, fewer hands on the pot, clean division, more control. The kicker? They never intended to tell me, not even after it was done. They said you'd understand, Ava said. That you're logical, that you don't care about that kind of thing. I did care. Not about the money, but the betrayal, the rewriting of roles, the gall to treat me like a tool and then discard me without warning. I thanked her. Paid the bill. Walked out into the cold with a strange calm in my chest. Because now I understood the game wasn't spontaneous. It had been orchestrated. Slowly. Carefully. They didn't cut me off in a moment of tension. They'd been erasing me long before Christmas. And yet, the utilities were still in my name. The structure of their lives was still mine. All they had was the illusion of power. So I leaned into the silence. Let it stretch. Let it become suffocating. On the 5th night, I received a text from Mom. We're sorry. Please, let's talk. I didn't reply. The next morning, I got another, this time from Colin. I hope you enjoy whatever fantasy you've created where this makes you look like the hero. And suddenly something shifted. That wasn't just bitterness. That was fear. Because he'd realized something. This wasn't a tantrum, it was a strategy. I wasn't burning bridges, I was letting them collapse, and the worst part? I wasn't screaming while it happened. I was silent, which meant they had no idea what I would do next. And for the first time in their lives, they were afraid of me. The knock came at 7:42 p.m. I didn't flinch. I'd been expecting it. Snow had been falling since mid-afternoon, coating everything in a thick, unforgiving silence. My apartment was warm, lights low, music playing softly in the background. I took a long sip of tea before walking to the door. 3 shadows on the other side. I didn't have to guess. I opened it just enough to see their faces, pale, drawn, touched by the kind of cold that doesn't just settle on your skin, but crawls inside your bones. Mom's lips were slightly purple. Dad's hands were red and stiff. Colin's fake confidence had cracked into visible desperation. We need to talk, Mom said, her voice shaking, not from emotion, but from the wind slicing in behind her. I opened the door wider. You're freezing! Dad stepped forward, hopeful. We haven't had heat for 3 days. The fireplace isn't cutting it. The water pipes are... Come in, I said, stepping aside. They flooded into my apartment like refugees. Colin made straight for the kitchen and grabbed a mug. Didn't even ask. Mom peeled off her coat, sat down on the couch, and exhaled like she hadn't breathed in days. Dad leaned against the wall near the radiator, palms splayed out like a man rediscovering warmth. I stayed by the door. So, I said, what's the plan? Mom blinked. What plan? You came all the way here. Surely there's an offer, a justification, a script, Colin glared at me. Just turn the damn power back on. There it was. Not a request, not remorse, just an order. No, I said. Colin slammed his mug down. Jesus, Leah, you're acting crazy. I walked past him slowly, picked up the mug, rinsed it in the sink, and placed it upside down in the rack. I didn't speak until the silence thickened. I'm not crazy, I said. I'm just done. Dad cleared his throat, shifting gears. Look, I know things got heated on Christmas. No, they didn't, I interrupted. They got cold. Very cold. Mom leaned forward, trying softness. We didn't mean it like that. You meant it exactly like that, I replied. We were thinking of the family's future. Colin has children. Colin has a mortgage he can't pay, a job he might lose, and a wife who messages me behind his back, I said flatly. Colin's jaw tightened. She what? Oops. He turned to Mom. Did you know about that? I didn't, Mom said quickly, eyes darting toward me. What exactly did she say? But I didn't answer. That wasn't the game I was playing. Instead, I walked to my bookshelf, pulled out a slim folder, and set it on the coffee table. This, I said, is every expense I've covered since 2016. Categorized by urgency, value, and whether you ever paid me back. Spoiler, you didn't. Dad stiffened. You kept records? I always keep records, I said. Mom opened it, started flipping through pages, electric bills, plumbing repairs, car down payments, even birthday parties I financed. Colin leaned over her shoulder and went silent. I'm not showing you. This to guilt trip you, I said. I'm showing it to make one thing clear. I didn't leave the family. I was erased, bit by bit, one transaction at a time. Colin stepped back. So what? This is blackmail? No, I said. This is accounting. They said nothing for a long moment. Then Dad sighed. You've made your point. Now what? I already told you, I said. You want utilities? 10 grand, up front, in cash. Then I'll consider reinstating services for 30 days. You're out of your mind, Colin snapped. No, I said. I'm finally thinking clearly. Mom stood, her face pale. We don't have that kind of money. That's funny, I said. You had enough to go to Maui last spring. That was different, she said quickly. That was a family trip. I wasn't invited. She looked away, and that's when Dad tried a different tactic. He walked toward me, voice low. I don't want this to get uglier than it already is. I held his stare. Then you should have thought about that before weaponizing Christmas. Colin looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Not as a sister, not even as a person. As a threat. This is who you are now? He asked. Some cold, bitter woman obsessed with revenge? I walked to the door and opened it. No, I said. I'm someone who finally understands what her silence cost her. They didn't move, so I tilted my head. You should go. The storm's not letting up and you've got no heat. You might want to find a motel. Or maybe ask Aunt Renee. She's always had opinions. That got a reaction. Dad's eyes narrowed. You spoke to her? She called. Me, I said. Wanted to mediate. Mom looked panicked. What did she say? She said something about how people punish what they envy. They all went still, because they knew that wasn't just a philosophical quote, it was a diagnosis. Colin stormed out first, slamming the door so hard it rattled the hinges. Mom followed, muttering, You'll regret this, like it was a spell. Dad paused the longest, standing at the threshold, watching me. Finally, he said, You've changed. I didn't blink. No, I said. I've just stopped pretending. Then I closed the door, locked it, and for the first time in a very long time, I didn't check to see if they were standing there, because I didn't care. They thought they were staging a comeback. But what they walked into wasn't a home. It was the boardroom, and I was the only one holding the ledger. The first sign of collapse didn't come from Colin or from my parents. It came from Aunt Renee. A missed call, then a text. "Sweetheart, give me a ring when you can. I'm worried." She never reached out. Not during birthdays, not during funerals, not when Mom had her surgery last year. Her sudden concern wasn't sentiment, it was reconnaissance. I let the call go to voicemail, then played it on speaker while folding laundry. "Leah, I'm not getting involved in whatever's happening between you and your parents, but, well, your mother's not doing great." She mentioned the pipes, froze. I told her she should have reached out. "You know I don't like to meddle, but this is family, sweetheart. Don't let it go too far." That last sentence hung in the air longer than it should have. Don't let it go too far. Not they. Me. It was already reframed. I was the one letting something spiral, not the people who initiated it. I didn't reply. Instead, I logged into the security cam feed. The front yard was buried in snow, no movement. I clicked into the interior, camera that still ran off a backup battery, and watched the living room. The couch had blankets piled high. A space heater, plugged into a generator, glowed faintly near the fireplace. Dad was speaking on the phone, pacing furiously. Mom sat in silence. Colin was nowhere in sight. And then I noticed something odd. The pantry door was open. The shelves were half empty. Bottled water, instant food, paper plates. Someone was preparing to be in survival mode. The screen froze for a second, then refreshed. A new figure appeared. It was Ava. She moved quietly, placing items into a duffel bag. Snacks, medicine, chargers. She wasn't restocking. She was gathering. And that's when the realization hit me. Not just about her, but about the timeline. Ava had been planning to leave, not just now. Before Christmas, before the will, maybe even before the utilities were shut off. I rewound the footage. 2 days back, she had made 3 similar passes through the pantry, each time a different bag. I leaned back. They weren't just unraveling, they were fracturing. And not because I left, but because I was no longer the glue holding up the illusion. That afternoon, I finally called Aunt Renee. She picked up on the second ring. "Leah, thank God. I got your message." "Good. I've been talking to your mom. Look, I'm not saying anyone handled things well, but freezing your family out in winter?" "I didn't freeze anyone," I said calm. "I stopped paying their bills. They had every chance to take responsibility before now." There was a pause. "Your dad said you changed all the account passwords." "No, I changed the access to accounts that are legally mine. If they think otherwise, they're free to get legal counsel." Her voice stiffened. "You're being harsh." "I'm being legal." Another pause. "I just don't want to see the family torn apart over pride." There it was. The word they always used when they wanted to make their exploitation sound like a noble sacrifice. Pride. "Funny," I said, "that no one worried about pride when they removed me from the will or when Colin used my name to fake power of attorney." Silence. "What?" "They tried to authorize changes to accounts they don't own." "That's fraud, Renee. I don't think this is about pride anymore. I think it's about survival." "You think your parents would do that?" "I think Colin would, and I think they'd let him, as long as it served their interests." She didn't argue, which told me everything. Later that night, Ava texted, "Again, I need to meet, just us." We met at a gas station 20 minutes outside of town, neutral, anonymous. She got into my car with a look I hadn't seen before. Not fear, clarity. "I'm leaving him," she said. No preamble, I should have done it 2 years ago, but I kept waiting for the right time. I nodded, waiting. She handed me an envelope. Inside were photocopies, legal documents, an email thread between Colin and a real estate lawyer, plans to transfer ownership of our parents' house into his name once they were declared financially incompetent. The process was already in motion. They didn't know I saw this, Ava said. He printed it at home, left it on the dining table. Once, he said you wouldn't care, that you'd sign anything if it was framed as helping the family. I held the envelope tighter. He said what? That you'd never say no. You didn't know how to. The paper crinkled under my fingers. It wasn't just betrayal. It was calculation. They had planned to remove me, not because I was a threat, but because I wasn't. Because I was dependable. Predictable. The one who always said yes. Ava reached into her coat. One more thing. She pulled out a voice recorder. Hit play. It was Colin's voice. She'll fold. She always does. All we have to do is freeze her out long enough and she'll come back begging to make it right. Leah needs us more than we need her. The recording ended. I exhaled. It wasn't rage that followed. It was something colder. Precision. The next morning, I drafted a cease and desist letter, citing financial impersonation and attempted fraud. Attached evidence. Forwarded it to an attorney I'd worked with briefly during a property dispute 3 years back. A professional. Quiet. Relentless. By noon, his office confirmed the letter had been served, and then I did one more thing. I emailed Colin directly. Since you believe I need the family more than the family needs me, let me formally confirm otherwise. Effective immediately, you are not authorized to access or act on behalf of any financial instrument connected to my name. Any attempt to do so will be handled accordingly. Consider this the last time I engage with you directly. No greeting, no sign-off, no apology. That night, I slept through without waking once, because for the first time, I wasn't reacting to their damage. I was preempting it. The therapist's office was warm, quiet, and unnervingly beige. Nothing in. The room demanded attention. Not the furniture, not the art, not even the therapist herself. She had a way of folding into the space like she belonged to the silence rather than disrupting it. I liked that. I'm not sure why I'm here, I said. She nodded. That's okay. I'm not breaking down. I'm not crying. I'm functioning. Of course, she said calmly, then waited. I watched her for a long moment. Then I said, they erased me, quietly, efficiently, like they were writing over my name with someone else's. She didn't respond with sympathy. Just a single question. How long have you felt that way? I opened my mouth, closed it, then looked down at my hands. I think, since I was 15. It startled me. The words, the accuracy, the moment. I said it, I could see it. The summer Dad borrowed my college savings to bail Colin out of a DUI lawsuit. The time Mom cried in the kitchen about how hard it was to raise 2 kids and guilted me into skipping a scholarship interview to babysit. The first time I gave something up, not out of love, but because I was told it was expected. A duty. A sign of maturity. Did they thank you? The therapist asked. No. But they said I was strong. Responsible. And what did that mean, really? That I didn't complain. That I didn't need. Silence again. But it wasn't empty. It was cutting through me. You've been useful, she said, but not loved. It should have hurt, but it didn't, because it was true. That night, I walked home in the dark. Snow crunched beneath my boots. I passed Christmas lights still blinking in windows, plastic Santas slowly deflating on front lawns. The world hadn't stopped spinning, but mine had rotated hard, on its own axis. Back in my apartment, I sat in the dark for a moment before turning on the light. I opened the folder I kept in the back of my closet. Not bills, not legal notices, letters, birthday cards, receipts for things I'd paid for that weren't mine. Colin's second honeymoon, my parents' anniversary cruise, a down payment on a car I never drove. At the bottom was a handwritten note from Mom. Leah, thank you for covering the dental work. You're always so dependable. We're lucky to have you. Dependable, not loved, not cherished, not even truly seen. Useful. I placed the note on the table, laid my palm flat on it, and said out loud, "That's the last time." The next morning, I canceled a transfer I'd set up months ago, an automatic payment for their mortgage insurance premium. It had been running for nearly a year, unnoticed. They probably assumed Dad had restarted it, or that some extension had kicked in. It was me. Always had been. Not anymore. I got a call from Mom around noon. I let it ring, then again, and again. When the voicemail came through, I listened. She didn't yell, didn't accuse. She cried. We didn't realize the payment stopped, Leah. We thought it was covered. We just need a little help getting through the next couple of weeks. Colin is trying, but his hours got cut. She didn't say, please, just, we need, as if I were still part of that we. I opened my laptop and checked the insurance company's site. They had 10 days before lapse. That would trigger loan default, which meant the bank would demand full monthly principal, not just the interest buffer. I didn't touch it. Let it roll. That night, Ava texted, "You were right. They're panicking. Colin just screamed at your dad in front of the kids. He thinks your silence is a tactic." I stared at the message. Silence isn't a tactic. It's a boundary. I typed that out, then deleted it. Instead, I asked, "Are you okay?" She replied, "I'm watching everything fall and realizing it was always rotten. Just painted over." The next afternoon, I walked into the therapist's office again, sat in the same chair. She looked up from her notebook. "How was your week?" "I'm not angry," I said. "That's good." "No, that's alarming." She tilted her head. "I should be angry. I should want to scream, break things, lash out. But all I feel is this stillness." She nodded. Slowly. "That's not apathy, that's clarity. Your nervous system is no longer in defense mode." I blinked, then whispered, "Then why do I feel so dangerous?" She smiled, not kindly, almost with respect. "Because for the first time in your life, Leah, you're not confused. And for people who've benefited from your confusion, that is dangerous." I left with that sentence burning behind my ribs. They thought I was cold. They hadn't seen cold yet. Not the kind born from heat denied, from love withheld, from decades of pretending to be okay because being useful was the only way I was allowed to exist. Back home, I packed a box, not to move, to remove. Photos, cards, anything sentimental that had strings buried in guilt. I labeled it archive, not mine, and shoved it into the hall closet. Then I poured a glass of wine, sat on my couch, and stared out the window. The storm was lifting. But in me? The freeze had just begun. The email subject line was short. "Let's talk." I almost deleted it without opening. But curiosity has a sharp edge, and something in me wanted to see how they'd spin it this time. It was from Mom. "Leah, I miss you. Your father's not well. We've all been through so much. Let's not throw away family over something temporary. Please come by, or at least call. We need to put this behind us." There it was, worded so gently, so vaguely, so strategically. No mention of the will, no mention of the power being cut, no acknowledgement of how the temporary situation had been designed to erase me. Just a soft, nostalgic haze, a false olive branch. I read it 3 times, then archived it. Not deleted, archived. I wanted to remember the exact tone the next time they claimed I was the unreasonable one. An hour later, I received a group text from Colin. Happy to hear you're still rich enough to ignore your family. Must be nice to sleep at night. No punctuation, no pretense, just bitterness pressed through cheap words. I didn't respond, but Ava did, privately. He's unraveling. He wanted me to ask you for money yesterday. I said no. He said I was choosing you over my marriage. I wrote back. What did you say? I said if that's true, maybe he should ask why. I didn't expect loyalty. I wasn't asking for allies. But Ava had made her choice, and I didn't owe her anything for it. That was the difference between her and them. She didn't try to trade decency for leverage. Later that night, I wrote a reply to Mom's email. I didn't send it, but I needed to see the words. You didn't lose me when you cut me out of the will. You lost me when you decided silence would be easier than respect. When you let Colin speak for the family, and then act surprised when I refused to play along. I saved it. Just for myself. The next morning, I got a delivery. A small box. No, return label. Inside was a silver bracelet, simple, tasteful, something Mom would pick. Tucked underneath was a folded note. Saw this and thought of you. Let's not let pride destroy what's left. Love, Mom. Pride. Again. As if holding boundaries was vanity. I turned the bracelet over in my hand and found the store tag still. Attached. Not a receipt, not a gift slip. A clearance sticker, $19.99. Not because I cared about the price, but because of what it revealed. She didn't buy this for me. She bought it because it was cheap, convenient, an afterthought. Just like I'd always been. I placed it back in the box, taped it shut, dropped it in the trash. They weren't reaching out to reconnect. They were testing how much dignity I was willing to trade for the illusion of peace. I chose silence again. But it didn't last. That evening, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Then listened. Dad. His voice was tired. Not angry, not cold, just empty. Your mother's not doing well. She hasn't been eating. The stress is, look, I know we said things. I know we handled it wrong. But I need you to come by. Just talk to her, please. There it was. The pivot. From control to pity. From superiority to guilt. And I felt nothing. Because it wasn't a confession. It was a negotiation. A pitch. I played the message twice. Then sent it to my attorney. Just in case. The next day, I walked past the house. I didn't stop. Just passed by slowly, hood up, scarf tight. The driveway was unshoveled, curtains drawn, no lights. It didn't look like a home anymore. It looked like a monument to their own design. When I got home, there was one more message waiting. Colin again. So you win. Everyone's miserable. Hope that makes you feel better. I almost laughed, because that was the tell. You win. As if this had been a game. As if I had been playing. I typed one sentence, sent it. I wasn't trying to win. I was just refusing to lose anymore. There was no reply, and that silence was the most honest thing he'd ever given me. It started with the knock. 3 slow, heavy taps, like the person behind the door didn't want to be there, but had nowhere else left to go. I didn't move at first. Just stared at the door from my couch, wine untouched, laptop still open to my bank's auto payment dashboard. The number I'd disabled last month, the one labeled Dad House Utility Loan, still sat grayed out, inactive, like a ghost of a habit I'd finally exercised. The knock came again. I stood, walked slowly to the door, and opened it. Dad, he, looked smaller, or maybe just more honest. His winter coat was zipped too high, his scarf uneven. For the first time in my life, he looked ordinary. Not like the man who used to lean across the dinner table like he owned the air. Leah, he said, voice hoarse. Can I come in? I stepped aside without a word. Let him carry the weight of his own ask. He didn't sit. Just hovered by the window like a man waiting for a bus that might not come. I wouldn't be here if I had options. That was the most honest sentence he'd ever said to me. He finally turned to look at me. They're taking the house. My face didn't move. I didn't even blink. Your mother's heart meds cost more than we thought. Colin can't help. Ava left last week with the kids, said she needed space. His jaw tightened. We made a mistake. With you. We thought you were fine. You've always been strong. I poured tea. I didn't ask if he wanted any. Your brother's going through hell, he added. There it is, I said calmly. The real reason you're here. He blinked. You still think this is about Colin, I said. You still think I orbit his needs, that I exist to catch the things he drops. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. You came to me because he failed, not because you regret what you did to me. He said nothing. Then, what do you want me to say? That we were wrong? That we used you? Fine. We were. We did. You want an apology? No, I said quietly. I want the truth. Just once. He rubbed his face. We thought Colin would take care of us, that he'd be the one around when we got old. And me? You were never supposed to stay. You were the one who'd leave, I almost laughed. And yet I'm the one who paid your gas bill for 5 winters in a row. He looked away. We didn't think you'd hold a grudge. This isn't a grudge, I said coldly. This is a withdrawal. That silenced him. He took a shaky breath. Your mother, she's not well. Emotionally, she's not sleeping. Neither, did I said. The night you called me a liability in your kitchen. I didn't. You did, with your silence. He opened his mouth again, then closed it. There was a long pause. Finally, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a wrinkled envelope, placed it on the table. We had the lawyer redo the paperwork, he said. You're back in. Equal. Split. We want to make things right. I didn't touch the envelope. You think this is about money? I asked. It's about fairness. No. It's about desperation. He didn't deny it. I picked up the envelope, opened it. Inside was a photocopy of the amended will. Signed. Notarized. I placed it back down, then looked up and said the one thing he hadn't expected. I want it all. He stared at me. You heard me? I said. Not a split, not a share, not a line in the will. I want every cent, every deed, everything you tried to take from me when you thought I wouldn't fight. He stepped back. That's not, Leah, that's not fair. No, I said, but it's just. His lips parted, but no sound came. You gambled with your legacy, I said, voice like steel. And you lost. He turned to leave, but I wasn't finished. One more thing, I said. Tell Colin I'll be in touch. There are a few things in my name he's still using. I want them returned, or I press charges. You wouldn't. I stared at him, silent, unblinking. He left without another word. When the door closed behind him, I stood there for a long time. Then I took the envelope, slid it into the shredder, and watched the paper disappear into dust. Because I didn't want it. I wanted freedom, and they'd already given me that, when they tried to take everything else. It was snowing again, not the frantic, angry kind of snow, just quiet flakes drifting, like ash over the street, covering what had been broken in something soft and momentary. I watched it from the window of my new apartment. Small, rented, mine. The silence was no longer empty. It was earned. I hadn't spoken to Colin since the lawyer sent the final letters, cease and desist orders, a repayment schedule for the debts in my name, and a quiet clause about police involvement if he defaulted. No threats. Just timelines, deadlines, facts. the same way he used to email me when he needed money. "Hey sis, I know you're good for it." Mom had tried to call again. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Just her breathing. That, more than words, told me what she'd become. Powerless in the system she built to control me. Dad hadn't called since the day he left my apartment with the shredded will behind him, and for the first time in years there were no family emergencies. No utility bills forwarded to me. No texts about groceries. No nieces with sudden school fees. No emotional blackmails wrapped in nostalgic photo attachments. Nothing. They had vanished. Or maybe I had. There was a moment, a single second that winter where I thought, did I go too far? But then I remembered the birthdays I spent alone while driving cross-country to bail Colin out of a DUI. The time I cleared out half my savings so Dad could reinvest in his retirement after a bad stock decision. The night Mom cried on the phone because Colin's wife was threatening to leave, and she needed me to just talk to her, as if my presence could glue the family back together. And I remembered Christmas night, the way they smiled when they cut me out. That was the last piece of my doubt, and I let it burn. Weeks later, I got an email from Aunt Renee. Simple, no subject, no fluff. I thought you should know. They sold the house. Colin moved back in with them. He's back in therapy, but the bills are piling up. Just figured you'd want the update? I replied. Thank you. I don't. I turned back to my desk. The therapist had suggested I write a letter, not to send, just to say what had never been said. Instead, I opened a blank document and wrote a new will. Everything goes to someone who needs it, but none of it goes back. No one would own my name again. And then I looked up, spoke not to the snow or the past or the silence, but to the person I used to be, to the ones who are still there. Still giving, still hoping to be seen, still folding themselves into someone else's comfort just to be kept around. This part is for you. You are not cruel for walking away. You are not heartless for setting boundaries. You are not broken because your family didn't see you. The people who love you conditionally never loved you at all. They loved what you did, not who you are. And when they try to come back, when the house burns down and they remember you had water in your hands all along, remember, you don't owe them a drop. You are not their reservoir. You are not their redemption arc. You are your own. So don't wait for the apology. Don't wait for the rewrite. Rewrite yourself. And if this story hit something inside you, if it woke up a quiet part of you that's been gaslit into silence for years, I ask one thing. Subscribe. Because the next story might be yours, and you deserve to hear it told right.